Here's a question that might make you uncomfortable. What if everything you've been told about spiritual eating is a lie? Not the kind of lie that comes from malicious intent, but the kind that emerges when ancient wisdom gets filtered through modern assumptions, social media sound bites, and our own desperate need for simple answers in a complex world. Last month, my friend Sarah called me in tears. She's been on a spiritual path for 5 years, practices yoga daily, meditates regularly, and has been strictly vegetarian because, as she put it, eating meat blocks spiritual growth. But Sarah also runs a sustainable farm. She raises fish in aquaponic systems, keeps goats for their manure to fertilize her vegetables, and maintains chickens that eat the pests threatening her crops. It's a closed-loop system that regenerates the land and produces more food per acre than any monocrop operation. But here's her dilemma. The fish are dying of old age. The goats occasionally need to be culled for herd health, and she's got more chicken eggs than she can possibly use. Meanwhile, she's spending hundreds of dollars shipping quinoa from Bolivia and cashews from Vietnam to maintain her spiritual diet. Am I a bad spiritual person if I eat the animals I've raised with love and respect instead of letting them rot while I import food from thousands of miles away? She asked through tears. This question haunts me because it exposes something we rarely discuss in spiritual circles: the gap between our idealized principles and messy reality. And Sarah's not alone in this confusion about spiritual food myths. According to Pew Research from 2021, these Hindu vegetarianism statistics reveal that 44% of Hindus in India eat meat, nearly half. In a tradition where vegetarianism is supposedly fundamental to spiritual practice, nearly half the practitioners are doing it wrong. Or are they? What if the spiritual teachers we revere aren't saying what we think they're saying about conscious food choices? What if the ancient wisdom traditions are far more nuanced than our black and white interpretations? Today, we're going to examine what spiritual teachers actually say about food. Not what their followers assume, not what social media claims, but their actual words. We'll dive deep into Sadhguru diet teachings, explore ancient Ayurvedic texts, and confront the uncomfortable truths that might transform how you think about consciousness and compassion. This isn't about convincing you to eat anything or stop eating anything. This is about freeing you from the guilt, confusion, and spiritual bypassing that happens when we mistake dietary rules for spiritual truth. So buckle up. What you're about to hear might challenge everything you thought you knew about spiritual eating. Let's start with one of the most influential spiritual teachers of our time, Sadhguru. Millions follow his teachings, and most assume he advocates strict vegetarianism. But when you actually listen to his complete Sadhguru diet teachings, a different picture emerges. In his video, "Is Eating Non-Vegetarian Food Ethically Wrong?" Zrenia Sadhguru makes a statement that stops most people in their tracks. All eating involves himsa, meaning all eating involves harm or violence. Plants are also life. This isn't just spiritual philosophy. Plant consciousness research by Backster in the 1960s showed that plants respond to human emotions and intentions. When connected to polygraph machines, plants showed stress responses when other plants were harmed nearby. Royal Rife's microscopic research in the 1930s documented what appeared to be cellular awareness in plant tissue. But Sadhguru doesn't stop there. He explains that from a yogic perspective, the issue isn't what you eat, it's how conscious you are about eating. The question is not what you eat, he says. The question is how conscious you are when you eat. Then he shares something that bridges ancient yoga with modern science. He explains the yogic understanding of digestion timing, which aligns remarkably with contemporary research. Fruits take 1.5 to 3 hours for complete digestion, vegetables take 24 to 30 hours, and meat takes 50 to 72 hours. If your body is busy digesting for 50 to 72 hours, Sadhguru explains, a certain amount of energy that could have been available for other activities is going into the digestive process. For someone serious about meditation and inner work, this energy consideration becomes crucial. It's not that meat is evil or tamasic in some absolute sense. It's that it requires more energy to process, energy that could be directed towards spiritual practice. But here's where these conscious eating practices become truly nuanced. Sadhguru doesn't condemn meat eaters or claim vegetarianism is mandatory for spiritual growth. Instead, he presents information and lets people choose based on their priorities and circumstances. If you're in survival mode, he acknowledges, eat whatever you need to survive. But if you have the luxury of choice, why not choose what supports your highest aims? This consciousness-based approach transforms the entire conversation about spiritual eating. It shifts from rigid rules to intelligent awareness. It's not about following dietary commandments, but about understanding how different foods affect your body's energy and making informed choices aligned with your goals. But Sadhguru isn't the only voice worth hearing. Ancient Ayurvedic tradition offers an even more nuanced perspective that might surprise you about Ayurvedic meat consumption. Now we turn to one of the most authentic voices in traditional Ayurveda, Damle, a doctor, a scholar who presents Ayurvedic knowledge exactly as it appears in ancient texts, without modern moral overlays. In his detailed analysis of diet in Ayurveda as a doctor, Damle reveals something that shocks most people. Ancient Ayurvedic texts not only permit Ayurvedic meat consumption, but provide detailed guidelines for when and how to consume it therapeutically. The Charaka Samhita, one of Ayurveda's foundational texts, states that meat can be given to patients even deceptively if it aids their recovery. The Sushruta Samhita provides extensive classifications of different meats and their therapeutic properties. According to Damle's analysis of these texts, Ayurveda permits meat consumption under 4 specific conditions. First, necessity. When the body genuinely requires the specific nutrients and energy that meat provides. This could be during illness, recovery, extreme physical demands, or constitutional deficiencies that plant foods cannot adequately address. Second, tradition. When it's part of your family's ancestral eating patterns, and your digestive system has adapted to it over generations. Ayurveda recognizes that sudden dietary changes can create more imbalance than maintaining traditional foods prepared properly. Third, digestive capacity. When your digestive fire is strong enough to process meat properly without creating toxins in the body. This varies by individual, season, age, and health status. Fourth, natural preference. When your body naturally craves it without psychological conditioning, meaning genuine cellular demand rather than addiction or habit. But here's where Damle's teaching becomes revolutionary. He distinguishes sharply between traditional animal products and modern factory-farmed meat. He explains the concept of seed energy, that animals raised in natural conditions, eating their natural diet, moving freely, and living without stress, carry vital life force that can actually enhance the consumer's vitality when consumed consciously. A broiler chicken that's pumped with hormones, never sees sunlight, can't move properly, and lives in constant stress, Dr. Damle explains, has no life force left to give. It's not food, it's just protein with toxins. Compare this to native chickens that forage naturally, move freely, and live according to their nature. The difference isn't just nutritional, it's energetic. The texts also provide detailed preparation methods, proper marination with digestive spices, cooking techniques that break down difficult-to-digest elements, and timing of consumption based on digestive capacity. This reveals something profound. Ayurveda isn't dogmatically vegetarian, it's intelligently individualistic. What's medicine for one person might be poison for another, and what's appropriate at one stage of life might be harmful at another. Yet somehow, this nuanced wisdom got simplified into Ayurveda says vegetarian good, meat bad, losing the sophisticated understanding that made these traditions so effective for thousands of years. Which brings us back to my friend Sarah's dilemma. Armed with this traditional knowledge, how do we navigate the practical realities of sustainable living while honoring both ancient wisdom and modern circumstances? Let's return to Sarah's farm. But now, with the wisdom we've just explored, her dilemma reveals something profound about how we've divorced spirituality from practical reality and created unnecessary spiritual food myths. Sarah's aquaponic system is a closed loop. Fish waste fertilizes plants, plants clean water for fish, excess fish provide protein when they die naturally or need culling for system health. It's biomimicry of natural ecosystem cycles. Her goats aren't just providing manure, they're regenerating degraded pasture. Their selective grazing encouraging biodiversity. Their hooves aerating compacted soil. When population management requires culling, every part of the animal is used respectfully. The chickens control insects that would otherwise require pesticides, turn kitchen scraps into eggs and fertilizer, and provide natural soil cultivation through their scratching behavior. Compare this to conventional vegetable production. Monocrop fields that require massive amounts of water, synthetic fertilizers, pesticides, and herbicides. The environmental cost of shipping quinoa from Bolivia, almonds from California, and avocados from Mexico. Here's an uncomfortable fact rarely discussed in vegetarian circles. Conventional vegetable farming kills more animals than Sarah's integrated system. Pesticides eliminate insects by the billions. Plowing destroys underground ecosystems, and harvesting equipment kills countless small mammals, reptiles, and birds. A study by the Rodale Institute found that regenerative farming systems that integrate livestock actually sequester more carbon, use less water, and support more biodiversity than plant-only operations. So when Sarah raises animals with love, allows them natural behaviors, integrates them into ecosystem restoration, and consumes them with gratitude and reverence, is this less spiritual than importing industrial plant products? This is what sustainable farming spiritual practice actually looks like. Applying Sadhguru's consciousness principle, Sarah is deeply conscious about her conscious food choices. She knows every animal personally, understands their role in the system, and makes decisions based on ecosystem health rather than convenience. Through the Ayurvedic lens, her animals meet all four conditions. They're raised naturally with seed energy intact, consumed from necessity based on what the land provides, aligned with her digestive capacity, and part of traditional ecological wisdom. This mirrors indigenous traditions worldwide, where animals are honored as relatives, consumed with ceremony, and integrated into spiritual practice rather than separated from it. But here's what's happening in many spiritual communities. We've created a hierarchy where dietary choices become markers of spiritual advancement. I'm more evolved because I don't eat meat becomes a subtle form of spiritual materialism. True compassion might look like Sarah's approach, understanding our impact on all life, making choices that support ecosystem health, consuming consciously rather than categorically, and accepting the complexity of existence. When Sarah realized she could honor both her spiritual values and practical circumstances, something shifted. The guilt and internal conflict dissolved. She began eating her farm's products with reverence, gratitude, and deep awareness of the cycles she was participating in. Her farming became a spiritual practice. Feeding animals became meditation. Making difficult decisions about culling became lessons in accepting life's complexity. Consuming her animals became communion with the web of life she was stewarding. This raises profound questions about how we define spiritual practice in the modern world. Are we seeking purity or integration, simplicity or wisdom, comfort or truth? What we've explored today reveals something profound. The gap between popular spiritual assumptions and what spiritual teachers actually say about food. But this is just the beginning. We've examined Hindu and Ayurvedic perspectives, but what do other traditions say? How do Buddhist monks in Tibet, who rely on yak meat for survival at high altitudes, reconcile this with the first precept of non-harm? What about indigenous shamanic traditions where hunting is a sacred practice, where the spirit of the animal is honored and its sacrifice blessed as part of spiritual communion? How do we integrate findings from modern nutrition science, microbiome research, and metabolic studies with ancient wisdom about conscious eating practices? And perhaps most importantly, how do we develop our own authentic relationship with food that honors both spiritual growth and practical reality? The responses to this video will likely be intense. Some will feel relieved to have their own internal conflicts validated. Others will feel threatened by challenges to beliefs they've built their identity around. I'm curious about your experiences. Have you felt the tension between spiritual ideals and practical circumstances? Share your stories in the comments, your struggles, your discoveries, your questions. Because in part 2, we're going deeper. We'll explore the hidden costs of industrial plant agriculture that nobody talks about in spiritual circles. The environmental and ethical implications that might shock you. How modern food marketing has co-opted spiritual language to sell products, creating confusion between ancient wisdom and commercial interests. Cutting-edge research on how different foods actually affect consciousness, meditation, and spiritual experience. Studies that both support and challenge traditional teachings. Real stories from spiritual practitioners who've navigated this complexity and found authentic approaches that work for their circumstances. And most importantly, practical frameworks for developing your own conscious relationship with food that integrates spiritual wisdom with scientific understanding and personal circumstances. By the end of part 2, you'll have tools for making conscious food choices from a place of genuine wisdom rather than guilt, fear, or social pressure. This conversation is bigger than any one video. We're building a community of people willing to question assumptions, explore complexity, and seek truth over comfort. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss part 2. This series will challenge you, support you, and hopefully free you from the prison of perfectionism that keeps so many seekers stuck in spiritual bypassing. Until then, sit with this question. What if your relationship with food could become a gateway to deeper spiritual understanding rather than a source of guilt and confusion? What if conscious eating isn't about following rules, but about developing the wisdom to navigate complexity with compassion? For yourself, for all life, and for the intricate web of existence we're all part of. The journey to authentic spirituality is rarely comfortable, but it's always worth it. I'll see you in part 2.